Before we get into this week's episode, I have a very special announcement I'd like to share with you all. As my valued listeners, I wanted you to be the first to know about the inaugural Women and Wealth Catalyst Summit that I'll be hosting in 2025. I hope you'll join me and some other amazing women on March 27th at the Golden Gate Club in San Francisco for a full day of impactful sessions, including fireside conversations, intimate panels, and engaging discussions with values-aligned partners. Do not miss this opportunity to ignite your path to financial success and become part of a supportive network committed to achieving wealth. Reserve your spot today at women.win. That's right, ladies, women.win. And join us for a day that will shape your financial future. If you can't join us in San Francisco, be sure to stay tuned for New York City dates and venues soon to be announced. I can't wait to see you all there.
Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together.
I am here with the incredible Shang Saavedra. Shang, I came onto my radar as someone who's really making waves in the realm of personal finance in a way that seems so holistic. Your journey to becoming independent, being able to live the life of your dreams is one that all Americans and all global citizens really strive for. I really want to thank you so much for being here today on Getting Rich Together and giving us a chance to dive deeper into your story. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Shama. I'm so excited to be here.
So Shang, before you became prolifically independent and started educating and evangelizing, you were once a young girl. I'd love to take us back to a young Shang. What was life like? Where were you? What were the things that you saw around you with respect to money? Tell us a little bit more. Take us back to 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years old.
Growing up, I legit thought that my parents and I were poor. We were immigrants and we actually moved all over the world. I was born in China, but at age 3, my parents took me to Europe, where I lived in Switzerland and the Netherlands as my dad was getting his postdoc and then became a professor for the first time, but money was super tight. I know we, for example, lived in hostels even temporarily while my parents were waiting to get into a rental. So that was definitely some of the realities that I faced back then. And I was an only child because I also had medical issues growing up. So I know that was pretty hard on my parents. My mom stayed at home most of the time. She didn't know the local languages as well. So there was a lot of attention focused on making sure that I was healthy, that I could go to school, that I could adjust to the local culture, languages, do well in school. My parents always wanted me to do well. And around age 10 was when I landed in the United States in Boston suburbs. I actually landed in a really great, fantastic suburb with a great public school system. And I stayed in that system all the way up through high school before I went out to college.
That's amazing. And so as you were growing up, and obviously, growing up in a culture and an environment that your parents were unfamiliar with, right? Like this is brand new. What was it like for you to sort of see your parents establish themselves as a young child and start to see how they navigated and started to navigate the systems here in the United States?
My parents were brave. I know that they really worked hard and did the best they could to give me the best life possible, even though I perceived it as being poor relative to the established friends and the other kids that I saw. I went to a music school on weekends where they were really rich private school kids. And that was like my first exposure to people who came from wealthy families. I was like, wait, you vacation like all the time? And you go to a private school that has like an electron microscope? What? And, but I knew that as soon as my mother mastered enough of English, she also started working. And that was maybe around when I was 11. So I became a latchkey kid. I watch my parents go to work and I go to school. I come home first. I start my homework. They come back to make sure practice your piano, is your homework done, eat your vegetables. And day in, day out, everything that I saw was my parents working, and they were frugal. So not a lot of nice to haves in our households, and a great emphasis on get a good education so that you can be successful in the future. My parents always valued higher education. It was not a question of if, but when that I would go to college.
I love that. So as you were sort of maturing through high school, and certainly high school, I think can be one of the most interesting spaces. All of a sudden, you go get ice cream, or maybe you hear friends who are working at the mall, and, there's all of a sudden little glimpses into independence. Did you find yourself really focused in high school on, okay, college is the goal here because this is the key? Or did you find yourself taking any part-time jobs or finding other realms of independence?
That was really interesting. I love how you mentioned the mall, because I know people don't do malls these days anymore, but the mall was the center of our lives when we were high school age. And I was not really allowed to go to the mall. For me, it's like you are shut at home and you study. And thankfully, all my best friends in high school were just as geeky and nerdy as I was. We all were stuck at home studying or helping each other on school projects or doing extracurriculars. My friends did debate, science team, math team. I did high school yearbook. So we were all nerds, and we recognized that we were missing out on the quote unquote typical American high school social life, but with the hopes that one day this would all pay off, that I would get straight A's and go to Harvard, and then I can enjoy life. So that was the expectation. Not that I loved it all the time, but I had no choice because my parents were extremely strict with me.
Wow. And so what's so fascinating is you did end up going to Harvard. So all of your, hopes and dreams as a young woman in terms of having the thing that you want, and then first glimpses of being like, I just got the thing that I worked really hard for. Like, what an incredible accomplishment as a young woman. So how did you decide, Shang, to then go into economics? Where did the desire and sort of the direction of where your young career take you sort of start from?
My dad gave me some book that explained like 50 of the most common jobs in the United States in high school, because I was trying to write these college essays and I was like, I don't know what to write for some of these. And he's like, why don't you read through this book and see if anything speaks to you, and then you can use that to write your college essays. So through that book, I recognized quickly, even though my parents had hoped and dreamed and wished for me to become a doctor or an engineer from a young age, I just did not have that background. I looked at what was required to go through medical school or the level of math you need to be at to be a good engineer. It was not me. And I was very realistic with that. I knew it might disappoint my parents, but I was like, you got to lean in on your strength. And my strength was I'm a very social, extroverted person, and I love to solve problems. And the closest thing that I saw in the book at that time, which isn't really the right career, but it was industrial engineering. And what I knew from industrial engineering was that you're constantly improving on something to make it better. When I went to Harvard, I picked economics as a safe bet at the time because I was like, it's something to do with business. And Harvard does not have a formal business school for the undergrads. They do, obviously, for business school, but for undergrads, it's a liberal arts education. And then I started joining clubs where I could be exposed to other upperclassmen who were also pursuing business. And that's when I learned that what I was actually seeking was very close to management consulting. And so starting from freshman year of Harvard, I knew that if I did an economics degree, that it could lead to a job in management consulting, which is advising people on businesses, which is what I wanted to do.
It's so funny, Shang. You have been so calculated your whole life. I mean, just here, up until now, right? Up until this point of our little narrative, it's like, wow, like what an incredible example of saying, okay, these are the things I want. I'm going to go to get them. Let me do some investigation, make some strategic decisions here. So while you were at university, obviously Harvard is quite expensive. How did you think about and what were sort of the family discussions around university? How much of the support of your family were you able to sort of draw on, and how focused were you able to be sort of in your studies at that time?
Yeah. My parents chose a very unusual path of making a huge lie to me. So when I first started in the United States, my dad was an MIT professor. And if he got tenure with MIT, then I would go to MIT full ride for free. That's the benefit offered to all tenure professors. So while my dad was working towards tenure, the original expectation was that I would go to MIT and be an engineer. And that kind of fell apart around like sophomore year, junior year of high school. My dad found out that he would not be up for tenure. Then the pressure was get straight A's and just get into the best school possible, which in their minds was Harvard. And the understanding was also at the same time apply to scholarships like crazy, and then they're going to finance the rest of the schools. So I applied to a lot of scholarships. I didn't quite have the correct pedigree for a lot of the merit-based scholarships. I realized that my parents never emphasized community service to me. So I had an absolute big vacuum in the community service aspect. So I didn't qualify for a lot of them, got a couple of small ones. And then I started filling out the financial aid forms, gave them back to my parents. I said, I kind of need some of your info. And I was gobsmacked when my dad said, you're going to college full ride. We're paying for it. I was like, you lied to me this entire time, making me feel like I had to take on student loans when actually it's a full ride. The reason why I thought we were poor the entire time was because my parents were scrimping and saving and investing so that they could send me to any college of my dreams.
That's incredible. Go parents. So yeah, that's what an amazing thing that they were able to do for you. So coming out of university, talk to me a little bit about these first jobs you had, and obviously getting on your feet and being a young woman, making money. How are you saving? How are you spending? It's fantastic you were able to graduate without any student loan debt, certainly giving you a leg up in the world. But these initial jobs, certainly as a undergraduate who's entering into the world here, you don't often get paid $250,000 a year when you're getting started.
Nope.
So talk to me about these initial jobs that you had. Talk to me a little bit about your perspective around personal finance early on in life.
Well, true to my word, I got a job in management consulting coming out of school. It was a top 10 firm, so I made more than the average income for a college graduate. At the same time, my parents did teach me about budgeting and saving before I went off to college. They just showed me a very rudimentary outline on a notepad. Say you write down what you spend each day on one side. Then you take your bank balance and subtract what you spend from the bank balance on the other side. And don't let that go to zero. Don't take on credit card debt. And for a couple of the summer internships that I had, one of my internships actually provided free housing. And I was very frugal the entire time. So I was able to back out savings from my internship earnings. My dad taught me how to open a Roth IRA. When I was 17 years old, I had my first Roth IRA with savings from my summer internship. So going into my career, I knew that I had the ability to save money and I wanted to get rich. I was like, how do I get rich? And one of the very first personal finance books I ever read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. It was recommended to me by another friend who was maybe 4 or 5 years older than me. So he was really into investing and stuff. He's like, Sean, you got to read this book. This is how you get rich. Read that book. I didn't agree with all of it, but it was the start of me going down the rabbit hole of where can I learn how to be good with money? And that's when I discovered the world of online blogs. It was blogging at that time, not social media. So there was a very influential blog called Get Rich Slowly that really emphasized frugality as part of it. And also to my advantage, the kind of geeky, nerdy friends that I loved being around in high school, I had similar types of geeky, nerdy friends after college, and many of them were interested in growing their wealth. So we did talk about investing from our early 20s. And over time, I began developing an understanding of how to use my work-sponsored 401k, how to contribute to my Roth IRA, how much to have in emergency funds. It was just me dedicating a lot of time to learning about this outside of work.
That's incredible. So Shang, if you were to sort of go back and say by the age of maybe 25, right, where were your finances? Were you maxing out 401ks? Were you actively investing in the stock market? Benchmark me around 25. What was it like?
And since I don't share my exact numbers, so I'll just be rounded. By 25 years old, I had 6 figures of net worth already. And that was a combination of a very healthy emergency fund, 401k savings. My very first year, I didn't max out the 401k because most of my savings had to create that very starter emergency fund. It wasn't until my second year of working when I really hit the 401k, the Roth IRA. I took on a second job. I side hustled as a wedding photographer, mostly out of curiosity to see okay, Shang, if you're giving advice to Fortune 500 companies while you're consulting, can you even run a company? So I challenged myself to run a company and chose wedding photography about all random things. Made money from that, decided why not just save all of it? So that was the extra income that I had that I put into a taxable brokerage. And each year I just learned more and more. And that just started adding. And I did take a break from age 24 to 26, 25 to 27. I'm really bad at math now. Ages 25 to 27, right as I hit the 6-figure mark, I went to business school and actually received a half scholarship for a business school. So a huge chunk of business school was already covered. My parents, again, generously covered the other half. And during business school, I still continued to side hustle as a wedding photographer, but I wasn't making management consulting money. So those were a couple of years where my ability to save plummeted. But naturally, you're a student. That's the expectation. And then after business school, I got my very first big girl 6-figure job, like legit over $100,000 of income at the time. I felt so wealthy. And same thing, I just kept being more and more frugal, challenging myself. What else can you get rid of? How minimalist can you be? How much money can you sock away so that eventually you'll be the very rich CEO that you've always dreamed of becoming?
What's so incredible is the fact that you had early community and people around you who were thinking similarly as you were going through business school and then stepping back out into the corporate career world. Did you maintain those friends, or how did you continue to have dialogue around these sorts of things? Where did you get your information from continuously?
I did not realize that over time I became the expert amongst all my friends. Because as I became more and more frugal, some of my friends, those early years who were interested in investing, relaxed. All of us saw our incomes increase because many of my friends also went to business school and many of us made plus, $100,000 after business school. And they started taking nice vacations, eating out. And I think becoming extremely wealthy they weren't so concerned that frugality had to be the path towards wealth because we all started making good money. And also in business school, I met a new group of friends for whom the pursuit of career was their only goal. That's the point of business school. Unlike some of the other undergrad liberal arts schools or maybe some undergraduate schools, there is no shame in saying that you want money as an MBA student. That's really what they're about. And the values were not always aligned with me. I'm still friends with many of my business school friends. But I think for them, it's more about income. Whereas for me, it's about compounding my net worth. So the approach is a little bit different.
Wow. I think it's so interesting to see how how life can sort of present different forks for everybody, and you can decide to sort of take a step forward, continue the path. What my therapist loves to say is, make a plan and work the plan. And I don't always do that. So that is not always my strategy, but I love your sort of diligence, right? And sort of staying really consistent. It's almost like this work habit or path from your early years of being diligent and focused is something that's really taking you through your life. It's incredible. So when did you decide obviously you've had an incredible corporate career, you've built a wonderful body of work sort of supporting major businesses and that's exciting. But what I'm most excited about is when did things sort of start to change for you on the personal finance side. So talk to me a little bit about how you are looking at your exit, your corporate exit strategy. When did you decide this is the year or when I'm going to retire from this corporate life? And how did you start to plan that? And when you were going into these job interviews or negotiating salaries, how did you also approach the earnership component that would then later help you retire young?
Yeah, early retirement was not the original goal. The original goal was to get rich. And it did not start changing until I met my husband. We met in business school. We got married right after business school. And in the engagement conversations that we had, he had a very similar frugal approach, actually more frugal than me, to money. And he said, the thing that women worry about the most is balancing career and children. And we both knew we wanted children before we got married. He's like, do you think about that? I'm like, yeah, I think about it all the time. That's all like my friends could ever talk about in business school is the added burden of being a woman is thinking about the childcare part. And so he said, what if we never had to worry about it? What if we just learned to live off of one income such that you could take a longer than necessary maternity leave, or maybe he could stay at home. Like he tried to couch that by saying, okay, I could stay at home too, but I know that wasn't really what he wanted. And so I was like, that is attractive. And it's something that no one's ever brought up to me before. So after getting married, we agreed to live off of the lower of our two incomes. Mine was slightly lower, so that was my income set the budget. We lived in the heart of Manhattan, and it was so freaking hard. I was like, it felt unnecessarily frugal, the things that we did, because we didn't have children at the time. We would later find out we had infertility. So yeah, no matter how hard we tried, we wouldn't have children. And we're doing this for some intangible goal. And while we were doing this, somebody approached me, a friend of mine who's also really into investing. He goes, Shang, I know you've kind of been struggling with this like whole frugality thing, because I started letting out some pieces of frustration. At first it was all hidden, but I started letting out a little bit of my frustration at my situation and talking about money. And he goes, have you ever read the blog, Mr. Money Mustache? He goes, you're kind of like that. I was like, who is Mr. Money Mustache? And I read his blog, and that was the first time I discovered this concept called FIRE, financial independence, retire early. And my friend said, you remind me of him. And I was like, that was not the goal. Early retirement's not the goal. But now that I read Mr. Money Mustache, I kind of like his style. He's kind of snarky. Like he's really, really snarky about being frugal and talking about how a lot of people just waste their money away. I'm like, all right, I guess. And then there's this concept of once your net worth is 25 times your annual expenses, you're considered to be FIRE. And at that time, I started running numbers. I was like, wait, we would reach this, or we would eventually reach this when I was 31 years old. And I was like, wait, okay, so my retirement is set. I'm FIRE, but we didn't have kids. I was still in kind of like the upward trajectory of my career. So I kept it like kind of a secret. I was like, no, I'm not going to tell people that I'm early retired. I still want to make my career a big thing. And I kept working like a dog in consulting. I mean, I still worked 16-hour days. Like that just felt normal to me. And my mind did not really start changing until thankfully, thanks to science and IVF, we had our first kid. He was born at the end of 2019, then pandemic hit. And gosh, that made it hard for me to be a working mom. I came back from maternity leave end of 2020, 2021. It was rough. Like anytime he had a sniffle, he gets sent home for 10 days until he tests negative. So that was not fun. And that's when the idea of really relaxing and piecing out of corporate started going into my mind. But it was a stepwise action. I first decided to leave management consulting because I was like, this is just not sustainable. I can't be a great mom and expect to work 16 hours a day. It's not possible. Plenty of my friends work 9-to-5 jobs. So I went to corporate first. And I had a great time in corporate. And then I became thankfully pregnant again with my second child through IVF. And at the same time, leadership strategies change at the top because corporate, you always have reorganization. You're always good to have different bosses in corporate. That's life in corporate. And in the new situation, right when I was about to deliver my child, I realized the new leadership I had was not going to be supportive of me. And in fact, I landed in the ICU after the birth of my second kid, I got an asthma attack out of nowhere. I had no idea that I had adult asthma. While I was like literally thinking, oh my God, I thought I was going to die. What have I done with my life? Isn't really what I want to do. I kind of had that moment like, Shang, you have the money. Why don't you go do what it is that you really want to do in life? So at the end of my maternity leave, I said, see you later, corporate, quit. That was middle of 2023. I decided I loved that to teach people about personal finance. I had already built up quite a social media following by that time. And so now I teach personal finance full time. I have a book coming out. And now I'm more like, let's see where this goes. I don't know where life is going to take me, but I'm the mom that I love to be now. Like I get to do something that is enjoyable during the day. And I also get to be fully present for my kids anytime that they're sick or need me, or the weekends, holidays, we can make it extra special.
I love that. And so, for those who are listening who are, unfamiliar with FIRE, right? And who are sort of looking at all the different ways in which, and I think it also is worthwhile to mention that the notion or what the American dream is has also really changed. I think that there used to be this idea that this was sort of, you work until you're 65 and then you retire and you have the white picket fence. And, there's a certain exported image, I think, of what we think of when it comes to the stories we were told on sitcoms in the 80s and 90s about life. So I'd love to sort of unpack a little bit more, Shang, in terms of how you are looking at like your pie, I guess. Do you guys as a family believe strongly in real estate? Are you still really concentrated sort of in your brokerage accounts? How has the pie sort of changed now from when you were younger?
Brokerage accounts are huge now because at the height of our careers, both mine and my husband, we both earned multiple six figures. So we're a multiple six-figure household. By the time that you've put the money into the 401ks and the IRAs, you still have a big chunk of money left. So real estate investing is not for us. This is not my style. I would be terrible as a landlord. So we put the rest into taxable brokerages. And now we're not committed to a particular geography. And I think that's part of this whole freedom that I like, is I don't want to be tied down to a school district or a geographic location. So yes, we own a home in New York, and that's a different story. But in my ideal state, I would not own any real estate and just be free to go wherever it is that I'd like. The greater portion of our net worth sits in low cost, diversified index and mutual funds in as many different accounts as possible. We would like to get as many tax advantages through 401ks and IRAs. But once you run out of those advantages, you have to use a taxable brokerage. And we're also the style where we're not day traders. We're not crypto investors. We're slow and steady. Just buy as consistently as you can, putting as much money when you are younger, let it compound, and then withdraw when you need the money. And because I was the only one who chose to step back from corporate life, my husband actually doesn't really have a different thing that he wants to do. So he's still in a really nice corporate role, provides for us healthcare, which is really important. And so we haven't had the need to withdraw from our assets because we basically live off of his income. And then whatever income I make from Save My Cents, I'm right now scaling my business, getting my book out. So there's a lot of freedom that we enjoy now without ever even needing to touch the assets that we have.
That's so amazing. I wish I had balloons that could be popping off with how wonderful, how wonderful it is. Congratulations, Shang. As you're obviously raising two young children, and certainly life is different for you now as a mom than it was obviously when you were younger. But there are a lot of, seems like, great values and practices that you were raised with. How are you looking? And I know they're quite young to sort of have any conversation around any of these things, but as a family, as you guys are looking about these kinds of conversations together, what are some ideas or visions you have around how you will approach this holistically with your family?
There's a Chinese saying that my parents told me all the time. I don't know how the Chinese saying goes, but the English translation is wealth does not last past 3 generations. which makes a lot of sense. Short of, dynastic foundations in the United States that can basically avoid income tax for the rest of their lives, most people who make it wealthy, they can maybe pass it to the next generation. But if they don't teach that generation, or if that generation does not take it seriously, then there is no wealth to pass to the generation following. I hear them on that. And I would say, yes, my parents lied to me, and I don't love the fact that they hid the fact that I didn't need to have student loans for college. I was like, oh, that stress for nothing. I understand where they came from, which is they wanted me in my very impressionable young years to understand that it's important to work, to have good work ethic, and that money is not easy to come by, even though it will look like it came very easily to me in the form of fully funded college. They did not want me to assume that just, comes overnight. And I appreciate that. And I did do experimental early retirement. With my first child, I took a 1-year maternity leave. Unheard of, but I took a 1-year, mostly unpaid maternity leave. And with my second child, it was 6 months. During both maternity leaves, I also thought about what is it that I like about being a mother versus being a corporate worker. And I realized for my own mental health's sake, if I'm not working on something on top of being a mom, my own mental health also suffers. And so I see that there's a space and time and role for work, even for mothers who don't need to work. I think it should exist as an option. And I'd like for my children to learn from me good work ethic. Money is not easy to come by. They are way more privileged than the average child, but I don't want them to take that for granted. And then furthermore, with money comes great responsibility. I don't want my children to grow up and let's say they go to fancy schools, let's say they get great degrees, and then take that and use it for evil. I want them to leave the world better than they found it. And so my husband and I try to live to the best of our abilities, a relatively humble life, not a lot of extravagances. If we do eat out, and actually Shama and I are recording this while my husband and I are on an overnight date, we kind of keep that separate from our kids because my husband and I have learned the ability to be responsible with a splurge, whereas my children have not yet learned that. So I don't want them to be exposed to constant splurges until they understand why splurges don't always come every day. And we chose for now, not to give them everything. We're still pretty frugal in many areas with the hopes that this sense of responsibility, this work ethic can be passed on through our actions because that's how kids learn. They don't learn by listening to what mommy and daddy say. They learn by seeing what mommy and daddy do.
I love that. I think that's so powerful. And certainly as your kids grow up, they will be more and more aware of the work that their mom does through Save My Cents, which I think is incredible when children get to see entrepreneurial endeavors and then also sort of the focus in your life passion around educating others and helping others become financially independent. I'd love to double click a little bit on Save My Cents, on the properties that you're building, on the educational materials that you've created. What was it like? What were some of the first things that you started to put out into the world to start to educate and support others? And how has that really evolved? And then please give us a little bit more of an insight onto your upcoming book that's going to be released, Wealth is a Mindset. How did you research this? Where is it coming from? Let's give our audience a little bit more of an insight into your current body of work.
Yes. When I started teaching people about personal finance back then, not now, but back then, most of the personal finance books were written from a numbers point of view, say, this is how to have a budget. You got to spend less than you earn. Dave Ramsey was very popular and it's very numbers. And when I started coaching, and at that time was friends of friends, how to keep a budget, I realized most of them were struggling mentally. They weren't struggling with the numbers. Anyone can add or subtract, but they couldn't bring themselves to do habit changes or to realign their lives to a new set of values. And that's when I realized, why is nobody talking about the mental side of things? Why is nobody talking about the behavioral side of things, which is extremely much more based in psychology. It's not economics at all. I was like, I should have gone to school for psychology. I kind of like those classes too. And I started sharing things that I would find myself saying over and over and over again to my coaching clients. And that's how I started on Instagram. I started as a very early financial page that did text-based posts, which are common now. But back then, Instagram was all fashion bloggers. So to have somebody who does like texts was really weird. And then I started offering free stuff, free budget spreadsheets, a free challenge. I called it a boot camp back then. And I offered things for free. And I realized when I offer things for free, people didn't do it. And my goal as Save My Cents, my motto is change your life 1 cent at a time. And change is the main action. Changing lives means that I need to see impact. I need to have people take me seriously. So I actually started charging for my courses. I now have a mindset course. I have a course on saving and investing for retirement. And I also do private one-on-one coaching. And I charge market rate for a couple reasons. One, because people need to pay to actually take it seriously. And two, we now have a whole cottage industry of other personal finance creators for whom this is their full-time jobs. And many of them are minorities. Many of them are women. And I'm like, I want to lift their tide. A rising tide lifts all boats. So I'm going to charge market rate so that I don't hurt those creators just because I'm financially free. So those are the reasons why I charge. And over time, all of this stuff, all of the psychology, which I did start going to PubMed and I started looking at psychology studies, any studies that involved money and behavior, and they're all scattered in a scientific environment. It's very costly to, for example, do a multi-year study. You can't really do a control placebo, for example. So they do maybe a little bit in the psych lab, but nothing. But I started pulling insights from all of these different studies. And I was like, I think I could come up with something that people can understand. Like if you're a high school level reader, you can understand what I'm going to say. And that's how my book, Wealth is a Mindset, it's going to show you how if you can change the way that you think, the way that you talk to yourself, if you address your mental health, your depression, your anxiety, your mood disorders, your personality disorders, that will then lead you to be able to make the strategic, rational decision to change your money behavior.
Amen. Yes. Do it. Let's go. Let's go after it, Shang. I'm such a big fan of this idea that we really need to address the 360 when it comes to money, because money isn't just something that we think about once in a while in our lives. It's actually like integrated, right? It is integrated into our identities. It usually stems from when we were young. You know, there are lots of money traumas out there, just as if you would say any therapist and they'd say, well, you probably have childhood traumas, because most humans don't walk away from life without childhood trauma. There's usually a money story attached, and it's usually ends up capping off what someone considers to be wealth for themselves, right? And wealth is also a very holistic word, right? It's not just one way. I mean, wealth also includes the money you have, but also the richness of the experiences you have. It includes how you engage with the world, how passionate you are. And so I love that you're approaching this from a very 360 degree standpoint. As you're looking at legacy building, you know, obviously, Shang, you know, I imagine that you and I will be alive into our young 100s. Maybe you have aspirations to hit 120 or beyond, but I would love to know, at a ripe old age, looking back to this body of work that you're now creating, and really how it stemmed from this young, diligent girl who wanted things and went after it, You wanted to be financially independent. You went after it. What is the body of work and the legacy that you hope to leave on this planet?
Gosh, such a good question. I would hope that people would take a look at what I do and say, she impacted and changed people's lives and made them better. Just living more beautiful, more kind lives. Because I address financial health as almost like a healthcare issue. Because I look at it from your mental health, I also ask people about their physical health, and I show myself like I'm now addressing my physical health very seriously because of my ICU visit, that wealth is not just about the numbers. It is about healing from your childhood traumas, from those money stories that you grew up with that maybe are not doing you a great service right now. But you know what? You don't have to be what you thought your childhood was. You can change your money story by literally just changing the way you see yourself and say, I'm going to be different. I'm going to see life and live life in a more beautiful way. And if I can help people do that, that means I'm going to introduce more joy and more health. And I would hope that that's what people can walk away with.
Ah, I love that so much. One of my favorite questions to ask people is, where do they love to spend their money? Obviously there are ways of saving, and saving, I think, becomes through your lens, certainly something very enjoyable and something to sort of seek pride and happiness out of. But there are, I'm sure, moments where you do part with cash on things that you love. What are some of your most favorite things that you get to enjoy with your money?
The number one is helping others. So not all members of my family are well off. In fact, one of them recently going through a lot of healthcare issues and could not afford to fix their air conditioning. I'm like, it's kind of essential. They live in the desert. They need air conditioning. So I wrote them the $5,000 check they needed so that they don't go into debt trying to fix their air conditioning. I like to be generous with my family as well. A couple cousins get married, always give them a nice gift. Then personally, for my husband and I think really investing in relationships, the romantic relationship we have with each other. We like to go on nice dates. We do take a vacation once a year without our children. So you have to pay for the babysitters when we're gone and obviously pay for the vacation. I love to host friends over as much as I can. I like to cook. I am a foodie. And I realized that money is best spent on others and on caring and loving for others. Because when you think of others, it's an ever eternal well of joy that you can draw from that takes away the attention that you put on yourself. And we're just so pressured in today's society to be like, you have to be perfect and you have to do this and your life needs to look like this. And that's what society says. I'm like, but if we take the focus away from ourselves, then I think that also lessens the need for us to always spend on something to make us happy.
That's so beautiful, Shang. How can the audience support you? You are on a mission. You are a woman with a plan.
Yeah.
What can we do to help evangelize what you're doing? How can we engage with you? Share everything.
I'd love for you to check out my book. Wealth is a Mindset. Publisher is Third State Books, and I'll be writing all about it on my website and Instagram. So my company name is Save My Cents, cents as in cents and dollars. And so I have a website, savemycents.com, and I'm on Instagram at Save My Cents, one word. And I'm also on YouTube, Save My Cents as one word.
Amazing. Shang, you are an inspiration. Congratulations on everything that you've achieved thus far in this beautiful life of yours. I know that our audience will just so inspired as I am to think about things a little bit differently. Looks like more of us might have the opportunity to reach financial independence and retire early if we can sit down and maybe glean a couple of tips from you. So thank you so much for being here today. I am so grateful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.